Imagine leaving your baby alone for 3 minutes, only to return and find an aunt feeding him a known allergen that makes him poop blood. Well, this mother is out for blood of her own, and the internet is begging her to go completely scorched earth. The writer has a 10-month-old baby boy who suffers from a severe non-anaphylactic allergy to corn and every single corn derivative on the planet. And when I say severe, I mean absolute misery. If this poor kid ingests even a trace amount, he gets full body eczema, incredibly painful gas, and bloody mucus in his stool that lasts for 72 hours. The writer has spent countless hours researching and refining a perfectly safe diet for her son, and every single person in their family knows about these severe allergies. So, the husband takes their 4-year-old daughter and the 10-month-old baby to his family's large dairy farm overnight, while the writer handles a commitment back in town. Because she has totally valid postpartum anxiety, she prepares and packs every single ounce of safe food the baby will need for the entire trip. The farm property is massive, with multiple houses on the land. The aunt and uncle live in one house, and the grandparents live in another. After eating breakfast at the aunt's house, the baby starts getting fussy for a bottle. The husband realizes he left the clean bottles drying over at the grandmother's house, which is about 300 meters away. He sprints over to grab one, leaving the baby with the aunt for less than 3 minutes total. When he walks back through the door, the aunt is standing there, smugly bragging about how much the baby absolutely loved eating her cinnamon buns. The husband instantly panics and argues with her, reminding her that the baby has severe allergies and cannot be given random food willy-nilly without a parent checking the ingredients. The aunt completely brushes him off, claiming the baby will be totally fine because it was only a few bites. Fast forward 24 hours. The writer is sitting at home with a distraught, screaming infant who is covered head to toe in an eczema flare-up, writhing in pain, and actively pooping blood. She is in an absolute blind rage. She wants to reach out to the aunt and rip her to shreds, telling her how reckless, neglectful, and shady it was to feed her defenseless baby anything without their consent. What infuriates her the most is the undeniable sneakiness of it all. The fact that the aunt waited for the exact 3-minute window when the father stepped out to shove a pastry into an infant's mouth. She takes to the internet to ask, would I be the a-hole if I sent a strongly worded message about how disgusting her actions were? Let us hold the writer's reaction up to the light for a second. Is a strongly worded message actually going to fix this? Or is it a massive underreaction to what is essentially the poisoning of a child? You have to wonder why the husband did not pack up the car and leave the farm the exact second he saw pastry in his allergic son's mouth. But the real psychological study here is the aunt. This was not an accident. This was a calculated strike. She knew the rules, she knew the diet, and she waited like a sniper for the father to leave the room. Why? Because she wants the title of the fun, cool relative so badly that she is willing to endanger an infant's life to earn it. It is a massive power trip. She looks at the mother's meticulous, hours-long research and dismisses it as hysterical modern parenting. By feeding the baby the cinnamon bun, she is non-verbally asserting that she knows better than the actual parents. This brings us to a deeply infuriating universal phenomenon: the older generation's absolute refusal to believe that food allergies are real. There is an entire demographic of people who were raised with the incredibly dangerous mentality that you can overcome allergies simply by forced exposure. They genuinely think modern parents are just making things up for attention. We see this bizarre obsession all the time, where older relatives cannot physically restrain themselves from shoving sugary junk food into a baby's mouth just to see them smile. One user shared a horrific story about how their own father fed them a full-sized mint chocolate Aero bar at 5 months old, left them choking and vomiting in a crib, and walked away. Another commenter revealed that their mother-in-law literally fed a 5-month-old baby raw honey and lemon juice on a spoon, which carries a deadly risk of botulism, just because the baby sneezed. And someone else dropped the term guanopsychotic to describe their mother trying to feed a 6-week-old newborn a fingerful of processed Cool Whip, claiming it was just a taste of cream. It is this toxic combination of arrogance and ignorance where boundary stomping is disguised as grandmotherly love. The Reddit courtroom was an absolute bloodbath over this exact dynamic. One commenter tried to play peacemaker, gently suggesting that the writer should tone down her language since it was the aunt's first offense. This person argued that if the mother unleashes all her justifiable rage, the aunt will just dismiss her as a dramatic, over the top parent, so she should forgive the aunt for not knowing and use it as a calm teaching moment. The internet grabbed that terrible advice and threw it directly into a wood chipper. The rebuttal was unanimous and utterly savage. A user named Jew Wolfie dropped the ultimate truth bomb, telling the mother that she is completely underreacting because this woman literally poisoned her child. They pointed out that a strongly worded message is totally feckless, telling the mother, "This is your hill to die on. This is scorched earth territory." The entire comment section rallied behind one terrifyingly effective strategy: graphic photographic evidence. Hundreds of parents demanded that the writer take video of the baby's blood-curdling screams, take high-definition photos of the agonizing eczema blisters, and take unapologetic pictures of the bloody diapers. They insisted she blast these images directly to the family group chat so the aunt could never gaslight them or downplay the damage she caused. A nurse even chimed in, saying it would not faze her professionally, but the family absolutely needs to see the bloody poop to understand the violence of an allergic reaction. The final verdict? The writer is entirely not the a-hole for being furious, but she is targeting her anger in the wrong direction. She should not be the one sending this message. Her husband should. It is his family, his aunt, and it happened on his watch. He needs to be the shield protecting his wife from the inevitable family drama. If he does not step up and rain down the anger, he is part of the problem. Here is the exact revenge blueprint to shut this down permanently. The husband needs to open the main family group chat, attach a video of the crying baby, a photo of the rash, and a picture of the bloody diaper, blurring out any private parts for safety, of course. Then he sends this exact message. "Hello, everyone. Since some people in this family refuse to take medical science seriously, these photos show exactly what happens when you feed my son corn derivatives. This agony and this blood is the direct result of Auntie feeding him cinnamon buns behind my back while I stepped out for 3 minutes. Let me be perfectly clear. Nobody is ever allowed unsupervised access to our children again. If you ever feed my kids anything without our explicit permission, you will be permanently cut out of our lives." It is brutal, it is indisputable, and it publicly shames the aunt in front of everyone whose opinion she actually cares about. But what would you do? If you walked into a room and saw a relative feeding your baby a known allergen, are you sending a polite educational text, or are you dropping the bloody diaper right on their front porch? Let me know your most unhinged thoughts in the comments, and do not forget to hit that subscribe button for more daily drama. Imagine waiting 5 hours to use a shared washing machine, and when you finally move the clothes, a pregnant woman screams in your face. Well, this guy delivered a brutal reality check, and the internet is going absolutely wild over it. The writer and his wife have lived in their apartment building for 6 years without a single issue. It is a standard setup, 12 different units, all battling it out for exactly one washing machine and one dryer. Now, anyone who has ever lived in a building with communal laundry knows this is basically the Hunger Games with fabric softener. But the writer and his wife have a system. They do their laundry on lazy Sunday afternoons when most of the building is busy. On this particular Sunday, they are both recovering from a really nasty illness, just trying to deep clean their apartment and get their lives back together. Around 3 in the afternoon, they check the laundry room. Both machines are completely full, but the cycles are totally finished. In their entire 6 years of living there, nobody had ever taken more than 30 minutes to retrieve their clothes. So they play it cool. They set a 30-minute timer on their phone, wait it out, and go back. Nothing has been touched. They do this again and again. They repeat this exact process for 5 hours, the same wet clothes just sitting there, holding the entire building hostage. Finally, the writer walks out into the hallway and loudly announces that somebody needs to come get their laundry. He sets one final 5-minute timer. When that goes off, they realize the dryer has actually been put on a half cycle, meaning someone came down, tweaked the dryer, and completely ignored the washer. At this point, the writer and his wife do the math and realize if they do not start now, they are going to be awake until past midnight doing chores while sick. So, the wife goes in, politely takes the wet clothes out of the washer, places them neatly on top of the dryer, and starts her load. The second the wife steps back into their apartment, all hell breaks loose. Someone starts violently stomping down the stairs, cursing up an absolute storm. The writer steps out of his door to intercept the threat and sees a woman in her early 20s. She looks shocked to see him, but immediately snarls that whatever freaking a-hole started the washer better not have left her clothes on the floor. The writer calmly explains that it was his wife, and they had been waiting 5 whole hours for her to move her stuff. The woman completely deflects, snapping back that it doesn't mean they can touch her stuff. The writer reminds her that other people actually live in the building and they are all waiting on her. She then looks him dead in the eye and lies, claiming she has been doing one load after another. The writer immediately shuts that down, pointing out that they have been checking constantly and nobody touched those machines until 5 minutes ago. They go back and forth, with this woman calling him an a-hole over and over again. Then, backed into a corner, she drops her ultimate trump card. She blurts out, "I am pregnant, you freaking a hole." Shh. The writer is caught completely off guard because she does not look pregnant at all. But he is also absolutely sick of being cursed at right outside his own front door by someone who is clearly just embarrassed about being caught. So he raises his voice and drops the hammer. He tells her, "I do not care. You still have to act like an adult. You cannot take care of something simple like clothes, and you are about to be responsible for a child. Figure it out." The hallway goes dead quiet. The woman stops cursing, her eyes well up with tears, and she starts to cry. She lets out one final pathetic a-hole before turning and running up the stairs. Later, when the writer and his wife go back to switch their own laundry, they find a petty little note taped to the dryer that just says, "Do not touch my stuff." But look closely at the writer for a second. 5 hours. Who on earth waits 5 hours to move someone else's laundry? There is a very thin line between being a polite neighbor and being so terrified of conflict that you actually make the situation worse. The writer admits that 4 months prior, a massive drama erupted in the building because someone threw a neighbor's clothes directly into the dumpster after only an hour. It caused a massive leasing office meltdown with passive-aggressive emails about being good neighbors. Because of that lingering trauma, the writer tiptoed around the situation for half a day. But by waiting 5 hours, he built up a massive reservoir of resentment. If he had just moved those clothes at the standard 30-minute mark, he would have just been an annoyed neighbor. By waiting 5 hours, he became a ticking time bomb. And then there is the laundry villain herself. This early 20s expectant mother is displaying textbook defensive projection. She knows she is completely in the wrong. She knows she abandoned soggy clothes in a shared machine for half a day. But instead of apologizing like a normal human being, she goes entirely on the offensive. It is a calculated manipulation tactic. When she gets caught in a blatant lie about doing back-to-back loads, she panics and uses her pregnancy as a human shield. She is banking on the social taboo of yelling at a pregnant woman to force the writer into submission. She wants to be the victim so desperately that she is willing to fabricate an entire reality where her blatant disrespect for others is somehow a justifiable quirk of motherhood. This entire fiasco taps into the absolute psychological nightmare that is communal living. Sharing resources brings out a primal, feral energy in human beings. It is the tragedy of the commons playing out right next to a lint trap. Whether it is a shared office refrigerator, a crowded dormitory kitchen, or a single washing machine for 12 apartments, there is always that one specific person who views the communal space as their own personal, private kingdom. It is main character syndrome at its absolute peak. They genuinely believe their time and their schedule are inherently more valuable than yours. The concept that 11 other households might need to wash their work uniforms simply does not process in their brain. We have all felt that blood-boiling realization that a neighbor has hijacked a shared amenity and expects zero consequences. You learn the unspoken rules of society in these spaces. You leave your laundry basket on top of the machine so the next person can politely transfer your clothes. You set a timer on your phone. You show up 2 minutes before the spin cycle ends. It is a delicate social contract holding society together. And when someone shatters that contract and society finally enforces a boundary, the offender instantly collapses into performative victimhood. It is weaponized incompetence blended with extreme unearned entitlement. The Reddit courtroom went absolutely feral over this dynamic. The comments were a battlefield of shared laundry trauma. A tiny fraction of people tried to play devil's advocate for the pregnant woman. One commenter tried to extend some grace, noting that the first trimester of pregnancy is brutally exhausting, saying they could barely stay awake for 12 hours a day, and maybe this girl just took an accidental 5-hour nap. Another person gently suggested that the writer's delivery was a little too harsh for a hormonal woman, hinting that implying she would be a bad parent over a laundry dispute was a pretty low blow. But the internet was absolutely not having it. The rebuttal was swift, merciless, and deeply petty. Someone fired back immediately that pregnancy is the most common condition in the entire world, and it does not give you a free pass to be an entitled tyrant to your neighbors. Another commenter delivered a massive reality check, stating that nobody else is responsible for taking care of your business if you drop the ball, and that this woman was lucky her clothes did not end up in the actual garbage. People started dropping their own unhinged laundromat horror stories to prove just how chaotic these spaces can be. One user recounted how they finally decided to go to a public laundromat after their home machine broke, expecting a chill afternoon of reading a book. Instead, they spent $55 and had to stay on high alert the entire time because people were literally stealing wet clothes directly out of the machines and throwing other people's clean clothes onto the filthy floor. Another user dropped a terrifying story of justice, explaining how a woman in their building had a bad habit of stopping machines mid-cycle to pull out other people's soaking wet, soapy clothes just to put her own in. The commenter caught her doing it, threw the woman's clothes straight into the trash can, restarted their own machine, and literally sat on top of the washer staring at the door until the woman came back. The woman never looked them in the eye again, but she also never touched another machine. The consensus was overwhelmingly clear. In the brutal, unforgiving thunderdome of apartment laundry, a 5-minute grace period is standard. 30 minutes is generous. 5 hours is practically a saintly level of patience that borders on madness. The final verdict here is that the writer is completely and totally not the a-hole. He delivered a very harsh truth, but it was a truth this woman desperately needed to hear before bringing a child into her chaotic, selfish orbit. You cannot weaponize your life choices to inconvenience an entire building and then cry when someone asks you to do the bare minimum. But we cannot just let that petty patence, don't touch my stuff note slide. If the writer wants to establish total dominance and ensure this girl never steps out of line again, he needs to counterstrike with absolute precision. Here is the exact word-for-word response to secure the laundry room forever. Take a giant, bright neon sticky note and slap it directly over hers on the dryer. Write this: I will never touch your things again, but any laundry left abandoned for more than 30 minutes will be immediately placed in the leasing office lost and found bin for management to sort out. Congratulations on the baby. Sincerely, the a-hole in Unit 4. It is polite, it is dripping with condescension, and it establishes a terrifyingly rigid boundary that involves the landlord. It gives her the choice to either act like a civilized adult or explain to the leasing manager why she cannot operate a timer. But what would you do in this situation? If you found someone's laundry rotting in the communal washer for 5 hours, are you politely moving it to the dryer, throwing it onto the dirty floor, or launching it straight into the nearest dumpster? Drop your most toxic and chaotic laundry revenge stories down in the comments. And do not forget to hit that subscribe button for more absolute drama. Your sister won't stop bragging that her 1-year-old is a literal genius because she can stack 2 blocks. So you laugh in her face at a family dinner and tell her the kid is completely average. Well, this writer did exactly that, and the family fallout is absolutely unhinged. The writer sets the scene telling us her sister had her first baby about a year ago, and ever since that kid popped out, everything she does is apparently on par with a Nobel Prize winner. Now, the writer makes it clear they love their niece with all their heart, but the constant humble bragging has reached toxic levels. If the baby claps her hands, boom, early development. If she babbles the word mama, oh, most babies do not talk that clearly yet. If she manages to stack exactly 2 wooden blocks on top of each other, clear the runway. We have a future engineer on our hands. The sister even heavily implies that the pediatrician is just so incredibly impressed by this infant, which the writer correctly clocks as standard, polite doctor behavior. But the breaking point happens at a family dinner. The sister is holding court, basically fishing for validation like she always does. She asks the table if anyone else's kids did things this early, framing it as a question but desperately wanting everyone to bow down to her superior genetics. She starts going off about how her baby is definitely gifted because, wait for it, she can recognize animals in a picture book. That is when the writer absolutely snaps. They laugh right out loud and tell the sister that the baby is a normal baby and that she is just biased because it is her kid. You can imagine the temperature dropping in that dining room. The sister gets visibly upset, immediately calls the writer negative and dismissive, and then blows up their phone later that night. The text message basically says that as a sister, the writer's only job is to hype her up, not minimize the child in front of everyone. The writer actually caves and apologizes, but the sister is holding a massive grudge. The writer takes to Reddit asking, am I the a-hole for attacking the narrative, not the baby? Now, we really need to put the writer under the microscope for a second. Was it absolutely necessary to publicly humiliate a new mother while she was passing the mashed potatoes? Probably not. You could argue the writer let their own annoyance build up until it exploded as a petty public teardown. But let us look at the sister's psychological profile here. This is not just a proud mom. This is a woman who is deeply, desperately insecure. She is looking at her baby not as a separate human being, but as an extension of her own ego. When she demands that her sister hype her up, she is basically admitting that she views family gatherings as a performance stage where everyone else is just an extra hired to applaud her life choices. It is a classic case of main character syndrome masking deep postpartum anxiety. And honestly, this is a symptom of a massive universal problem right now. We are living in an era of hyper-competitive, performative parenting. It is no longer enough to just keep a toddler alive and happy. No, if your 1-year-old is not speaking fluent Mandarin and coding in Python by Tuesday, you are somehow failing. The child development industry and social media have completely warped reality. Every mom influencer is out there posting aesthetic, beige-colored reels about their baby's advanced sensory play, which makes normal parents panic. So what do? They overcompensate. They turn every basic bodily function or accidental block stacking into a sign of undeniable genius just to soothe their own terror of falling behind. It is exhausting for the parents, it is annoying for the bystanders, and frankly, it is incredibly damaging to the kids. Which brings us to the absolute bloodbath in the Reddit comments. We have to look at the people defending the sister because they came out swinging. One commenter named Maestro Primus dropped a hard "Dode, you are the a-hole," arguing that she is just a new mom who is excited about her baby's development, and it hurts literally no one for her to think her little angel is a genius. Another user named Calico Flan went totally off, saying Reddit just loves hating babies and that knocking a proud mom down a peg makes the writer miserable as humanly possible. They are basically saying, what does it cost you to just nod, smile, and let this woman live in her little delusion? But then, the former gifted kids of Reddit entered the chat, and they brought all their unhealed trauma with them. It was a massacre. A user named Agosto and the Sun, who is literally a teacher, said the amount of parents who think their average child is gifted is astonishing, and they are doing the kids zero favors. Then a massive wave of adults diagnosed with ADHD and autism in their 40s chimed in. They completely dismantled the sister's fantasy. One commenter explicitly pointed out that praising innate intelligence instead of actual effort is how you create anxiety ridden adults who perfect the art of procrastination and feel like failures their entire lives. Another user named Rayleigh123 dropped a heavy reality check, saying this toxic competition is unhealthy for the baby itself. They pointed out that if the mother is putting this much pressure on a 1-year-old to be an absolute prodigy, what happens if she hits a speech delay later? The kid will shatter under the weight of her mother's impossible expectations. The absolute most savage rebuttal came from a commenter who said, keeping the sister humble makes it more likely the baby won't grow up with a massive complex and a false sense of superiority. My final verdict? The writer is strictly not the a-hole. Yes, the delivery was a little blunt, but sometimes you need a blunt instrument to pop a bubble of delusion before it hardens into concrete. You cannot go around asking other parents if their kids are as advanced as yours and not expect someone to eventually hand you a reality check. It is rude to other parents, and it is a terrifying preview of the pressure cooker that poor kid is going to grow up in. But since the writer already apologized and the sister is still acting cold and playing the victim, we need a path forward. If the writer really wants to shut this down permanently without starting World War III, they need to send this exact, mildly petty but undeniably logical text message. Write this down. Hey, I know you are still upset about dinner. I love my niece and I love watching her grow. But when you constantly ask the rest of the family to compare her to other kids, it makes it feel like a competition instead of a celebration. I will always cheer for her, but I am not going to feed into a narrative that she has to be superior to be special. Boom. Sent. It perfectly flips the script, sets a massive boundary, and calls out the toxic behavior while still sounding like the supportive sibling. But I have to know, what would you have done at that dinner table? Would you have smiled and choked down your food, or would you have laughed in her face just like the writer did? Let me know your most unhinged thoughts in the comments. And do not forget to hit that subscribe button for more daily drama.